Hey guys, welcome to Quarantine Cooking with Amy. Today we are going to make a chocolate rolled cake. You're going to hear a lot of noise in the background because I do not have a recording studio, so you'll hear my kids. So you're going to start off with a sheet pan, and you're going to want to spray that liberally with some cooking spray. Now, after you spray that, you're going to pull out a piece of parchment paper, and you're going to make sure your parchment paper is bigger than your cake pan, and you're going to just put that on top. Yes, I have a little sous chef with me. He cooked with me the entire time, mostly screaming that he wanted to eat. All right, so what I'm doing here is I'm making sure that the parchment is fitting into the corners because we want the corners nice and crisp. So we're just going to fold it down. And then you're going to spray that as well with your cooking spray. The idea here is you don't want anything to stick at all. Spraying the initial pan was actually just to get it so the parchment doesn't roll around. All right, so for this cake, you're going to need 4 large eggs, which you see me getting here. Then you're going to need a half a cup of all-purpose flour, a fourth of a cup, of unsweetened cocoa powder, 1 teaspoon of baking powder, 1 teaspoon, and this is optional, 1 teaspoon of espresso powder. I like it because it brings out the flavor of the chocolate. 1 teaspoon, half of a teaspoon of salt. That's 1/2 teaspoon, not 1 teaspoon. A half of cup of granulated sugar. 2 tablespoons of melted oil or melted butter or oil. We chose to use oil in this recipe. And 1 teaspoon of vanilla extract. So we found these little instant coffee single servings and found that 1 single serving is actually 1 teaspoon. All right, you're going to start with your dry ingredients. So in a separate bowl, we're going to start with our flour. That was a half a cup of all-purpose flour. You also want to, by this time, have preheated your oven to 350 degrees. Mom, can I save this? So half cup of all-purpose flour. Then what I'm going to do is I'm going to get my handy dandy sifter. If you don't have a sifter, it's okay. You don't have to use one. You can do it without, or you can actually use a wire mesh strainer and push it through with your spoon. I like the sifter. So we're going to add 1/4 of a cup of cocoa to the sifter, as well as 1 teaspoon of baking powder. You'll hear all my little background noises as the children behind me are cleaning up the kitchen. I'm also going to add my espresso powder here, and we found these little things, like I said before, and I know that I had previously measured it, so 1 packet is actually 1 full teaspoon of the espresso powder. And then you're just going to sift that into the flour. Try to get out as many lumps as you possibly can. My little guy in the background is playing with packets of the espresso powder. Kept him busy for quite a while. All right, so then we're just going to give this, I forgot the flour, or the salt. 1/2 teaspoon of salt goes in here. I've always measured it in my hands. It's just how I grew up. All right, and then we're going to give this a nice little whisk just to make sure everything is mixed together. If you have kids, this is a great part where they can help out too. As you see my almost 2-year-old helping me here. Whisk, whisk, whisk. All right, so then once that's all mixed in, you're gonna set that aside and we're gonna work on our wet ingredients. So into your stand mixer, I love my stand mixer because it works really well for this. Otherwise, you're going to be whisking for a while and your arms are going to get tired. So into my stand mixer, I am going to put my 4 eggs. So what happened here is my camera died. So you're going to add the 4 eggs as well as your sugar and your butter, and you're going to whisk them or beat them with your mixer until they are nice and extremely fluffy. And then what you're going to do is fold in your dry ingredients to that. So we already did that. Again, my camera cut out, sorry. So after it's all mixed neatly, you want to make sure you don't over mix because this is a very finicky cake, and if you mix out all of the air from the eggs, it will fall flat and not cook right. So you're just going to put it on the sheet pan and get as much out of the bowl as you can, obviously. And then you're going to spread that out in the sheet pan. I used my spatula to spread it out, and then I kind of gave it a couple of tiny taps to level it out as well. You can hear the kids behind me going, shh, don't talk, mommy's recording. All right, so you're just going to spread it out. You want to make sure it gets in all of the corners. You want this a nice thin sheet. Well, not really thin, but you want it to be even all the way across. You don't want any big fluffy parts and then flat thin parts. So you just kind of make sure you spread it all the way through. Make sure it's even all the way through. And then again, you're going to give it a couple of little taps, and then you're going to put it in the oven, and it's going to bake for literally like 10 minutes. 10 to 12 minutes is what the recipe says, and this is what it should look like when it's ready to come out. Nice fluffy sponge. It should have a spring back when you touch it, so you should touch it and it kind of poof back up, and I'll show you that here in just a second. So here it is, all done. My little guy's pretending to wash dishes over there or snipe chocolate from the bowl. I don't know which. Anyway, you want it to have that spring back. That tells you that it's done. This cake is really finicky. Even seconds can overcook it or undercook it. So you just want to, this is not one you want to walk away from. And at this point, all of my children decided to join me in the kitchen. And then, yeah. So after it comes out of the oven, you're going to want to flip it onto another sheet of parchment paper. Originally, I had tried pulling the parchment and then was going to flip it that way, but it works better if you flip the entire pan. I couldn't get a hold of it, so you'll see I use tongs. My kitchen tongs are actually my biggest helper in my kitchen. I'm short, so I use them to reach everything. But I lifted the pan up. You can see in the one corner, I actually got the parchment caught under the cake, and you'll see that I kind of freaked out about that earlier. So you're just going to want to peel the paper that baked on off. You want to make sure it's not sticking. I did have a couple little spots, and as you can see right here, that corner is folded under, and I kind of freaked out because I did crack that corner. All right, you want to do this while it is still really warm, so be careful with your fingers because it can get really hot. At this point, what you're going to do is you're going to roll it. So you're going to twist it towards you, and you're going to start at the the small end, and you're going to roll it. And yes, you're going to roll the parchment in. Don't worry, this part is essential. So kind of just roll it up as tight as you can, slowly. And again, this is going to be hot, so watch your fingers. So you want it as tight as possible. Nice tight roll. There you can see the roll inside. And then you're going to set this aside to let it cool. And you want it to cool just like that on a cooling rack. Now, while this was cooling, I went to the store and I told my oldest son that he was to guard this with his life. And this is what came out. It's a security guard with the name tag, Your Life. Okay, now we're going to make our peanut butter buttercream. So in the bowl, we have 1 cup of butter at room temperature. Mine was a little bit harder than room temperature. and 1 cup of creamy peanut butter. And you're just going to want to mix that and mix it and mix it. Again, my butter was not quite room temperature, so it made it a little bit harder. You're going to want to mix it until it's completely mixed together and it's nice and smooth. It'll look like this. All right, so to this, we are going to add 3.5 cups of powdered sugar. I did it about a half cup to a cup at a time. Normally I'll do this in my stand mixer, but it was dirty at the time since we had just made a cake. So half a cup is what I'm looking for here. And we're just going to put that in half a cup at a time. 3.5 cups total. Other ingredients include 4 tablespoons of heavy whipping cream, 2 teaspoons of vanilla extract, a pinch of salt. Alright, so you're just going to want to mix that all in. It won't take long at all once you start mixing in the powdered sugar. Just make sure that you're mixing it fully, there's no lumps left over. If you've got a small bowl like this, you want to mix it, you know, a half a cup to a cup at a time so it doesn't go all over. And make sure you're just like scraping down the sides and getting all of the flour incorporated. Or flour, I'm sorry, sugar, not flour. You don't want flour in this. Ew. If you're doing it with a hand mixer like I am here, it does get kind of tough. So you just want to stick with it. It will, once the sugar becomes incorporated, it does get easier. I like to use my stand mixer, but again, it was dirty because we had just finished making a cake. Alright, so now that you've got all of your sugar incorporated, you're going to add in your heavy whipping cream. That's 4 tablespoons of heavy whipping cream and 2 teaspoons of vanilla extract. I get distracted a lot when I'm cooking. I have 5 kids and they're usually in and out. As soon as I head to the kitchen, they come asking what's to eat. So you'll probably see little heads popping up every now and then. And as you can tell, they're a little crazy right now. Alright, so we're adding our vanilla in. And I think this is where my camera cut out. I was having camera issues on this day. So, yep, it did. So you just want to make sure that's all beaten in and all mixed together. So what we made for the buttercream is actually, I'm only going to use half of it for the cake. So you're going to want to put an even layer of this. I used half of what we made on your cake and spread it around. As you can see, as I unrolled my cake, some of it kind of cracked. That meant it wasn't as even as I had thought. And so I did have some thinner spots that cracked. All right, so now that we have it fully covered with the buttercream and evenly spread, please ignore the noises behind me. Again, I have giggling children, screaming children, and a dog that is trying to steal whatever he can find off the counter. All right, so you're going to roll this as tightly as you can. I am using the parchment to help me. You're not going to roll the parchment in it this time, but if you kind of use the edge of it to pull as you roll, it'll roll tighter as well as kind of stay together all at the same time. So you're not rolling just a corner and then going back down the line. They're trying to scare each other. That's what you hear, the screaming. Alright, so as you can see, you can kind of see the buttercream poking through a little bit. Again, it cracked. I had a couple of thin spots where it did crack as I was rolling it. And you can see my 15-year-old there hanging out to see what he can nosh as I'm doing this. Occasionally the 5-year-old comes in, steals what he can steal. They're sneaky when I'm cooking. They like to sneak things when they think I'm not looking. So just rolling really carefully. I do have some cracks, but it's not really going to matter because we are going to cover it with a ganache. So won't win any competitions, but it did taste good and was kind of pretty when it was done. So I'm going to transfer this to a plate. The rest of that buttercream I did freeze. Peanut butter buttercream is my husband's favorite thing ever. As you can see, children's trying to steal them. So we froze the rest of it. We'll use it again later. So here you can see it's all pretty. I did even out the ends and cut the ends off so it wasn't like oozing the buttercream at the end like that. All right, so here we are making our chocolate ganache. So in the pan, we have 1 cup of heavy cream, 4 tablespoons of butter. And we're just kind of cooking that down until the butter is fully melted and the milk gets warmed all the way through and kind of starts to bubble, but you do not want to bring it to a boil. You just kind of want to scald it. And you're going to stir that as it goes so you make sure that it's evenly heated through. So here it's all the way heated through. We're going to add a dash of salt and our vanilla, 1 teaspoon of vanilla, and 2 tablespoons of strong brewed coffee. The coffee again brings out the chocolate flavor and makes it richer. So you're gonna stir that up and then remove it from the heat. All right, so in a separate bowl, you're going to add 12 ounces of chocolate chips. I did milk chocolate because they were on sale. I had Ghirardelli milk chocolate, but you can use dark chocolate or you can use semi-sweet chocolate. So you're going to have that in a separate bowl and you're going to pour the scalded milk mixture over top of it. And you're going to want to let it just kind of melt that chocolate. So once that chocolate starts to melt, you're going to take a wooden spoon or even a spatula and just kind of stir it together to get it to melt fully. Okay. Your goal here is just to melt the chocolate. You're not trying to get it all mixed together yet. You're just trying to melt that chocolate. Once it is all melted, you're going to whisk it. Okay. You can do this by hand or you can use a hand mixer. We had just made buttercream, so my hand mixer was dirty, so I did it by hand. I want to whisk that for about 3 to 5 minutes until it's glossy and all mixed together. Once you're done, you're going to put it in the refrigerator to let it set, and then you will ice your cake with it. And it will be yummy and delicious. So this is what your cake is going to look like here in just a minute. I'm almost done. Ta-da! Nice and yummy and glossy, and it was just as delicious as it looked.